So, for all of us gathered from across our country and within Alberta, I invite us just for a moment to just take a breath and be with an awareness of our relationship to our First Nations peoples. The Palliative Care Society of the Bow Valley, that's the organization that is hosting this morning, recognizes that we are situated on the traditional territories of Treaty 7 and Métis District 4. And as such, we honor the hearts and the footsteps that have crossed these lands for many generations. And we want to specifically name the Inuit, the Métis and Blackfoot nations, and that includes, in our area, Siksika, Piikani, Kainai, and the Tsuut'ina nations, and those closest to PCSBV, the Stoney Nakoda First Nation. We also want to just honor our relationship to the land, to earth, and to land spirit itself for protecting and nurturing and embracing us, and for the indigenous peoples who preceded us here. And they have been stewards to the land, and they adhere to natural law, and they co-mentor us in finding our own way to honor the land and to nurture it. So thank you for joining this morning, wherever you are on the land that is under your feet. We are gathered together virtually and some of us in person to engage conversation with two of our mentors in the world of palliative end-of-life care and grief work. So if you have not yet had opportunity to be introduced to Dr. Samantha Winemaker, she is a palliative care physician caring for patients with serious illnesses and their families in the home. She's a clinical professor at McMaster University in the Department of Family Medicine in the Division of Palliative Care. She's won numerous awards for her leadership and palliative care education for healthcare professionals. And joining us as well, her partner in work, Dr. Hsien Seow, PhD, is the Canada Research Chair in Palliative Care and Health System Innovation. Also a professor in the Department of Oncology at McMaster University. He publishes healthcare research focused on improving the patient and family experience for those facing serious illness. He's also the co-author of The Tao of Innovation, 9 Questions Every Innovator Must Answer, and they are the co-authors of 2 life-changing books, and both of which are at the point of our discussion this morning. And with that, I will mute myself and turn this over to Sammy and Hsien, and we'll make sure you have slides to share, I think. Is that correct? We'll give you, Chin, if you'll share slide sharing authority to these two, that would be great. Thank you. Sammy and Hsien.
Yay, thank you, Bill, for that nice welcome and great to see familiar faces. I see folks in the boardroom too. Hi, everyone who are gathered. Yay! Is that Rosemary's hand? I think that one. No?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Penny.
Go ahead, Sammy.
No, it's reminding me, what is that show where the person looks through the mirror? I see Penny, I see
Oh, Romper Room, I think
Romper Room, yeah.
Romper Room. Thank you for inviting us, for taking some time out of your day. I do have slides, and I'm playing around. So I think if I share it, I will still be able to see you all. And I mean, we were obviously. Oh, what do you guys see? Do you see me and the slides, or just
you and one slide? Our first slide.
Oh, but you can change your screen, right? It's like a full screen share, right? You would think I would know how to share a slides, team, but it's like so many views that I don't know what you see. I know what I see.
Yeah, we see you and your slides as a screen share.
That's not good. No, you don't want to see me. Okay,
no, we see you twice. It's great.
No, that's bad. Let me just give me one moment while I do this.
You just had it.
I think I did. Okay, here I know what to do. Here, let's do this. Haha, there we go. This is gonna work, right?
That's it. Good
Yay. Job. Okay, well, good thing that we have been to Bow Valley, so that's why we feel like we're among friends. I think we are among friends, and we're really excited. And I think we'll just sort of talk a little bit about our story, our book, and our workbook, which is really exciting, and then maybe open it up to questions. So we can definitely, and then get rid of these slides, and we can and talk a little bit more. But I can see wonderful people in the audience. Sammy, did you want to say anything else before
No,
we?
just I'm so happy to be back in a way in the Bow Valley.
And we have so many pictures of you and me in the Bow Valley. I don't know how I ended up with this one. It's because I changed phones and anyway, it doesn't matter. Nobody cares. Okay, here we go, Sian. I'm gonna get us going here. If
Mhm.
I can get
Did
this.
you Photoshop me out of that picture?
No, no, anyway, it's because I changed phones and then all my photos are in the
I
anyway,
don't
it was too much.
understand. You're trying to take over.
We if you don't know, I think many of you may know of us, but if you aren't, we'll tell a little bit of our story quickly. But I think we work in this field of palliative care. I know that word is maybe less scary to folks on the call because we're hosted by the Palliative Care Society of the Bow Valley. But I think it will not surprise anyone that people find palliative care very close to end of life. Yeah. Sammy, did you want to build on that?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so this quote, I think, kind of summarizes what we often feel that we meet people at the very end and we're constantly pulling people out of the river, but we are really trying to find a ways to go upstream and find out why people are following in and really um, infuse an early palliative care approach to patients and families as they journey all throughout their illness
Mhm.
or any illness really, and not just at end of life. So that is really our mission and work, and I think hospice societies and communities have a big role in that.
Yeah, you want me to
Yeah.
talk to the slide? Okay. Um, so for so many years now, we have been trying to influence the competency of healthcare providers in this area called palliative care and a palliative approach. Sian has been researching them for decades, and I've been trying to educate healthcare providers for decades, and that should and does continue for sure. Uh, but it didn't seem to move the dial fast enough for patients and families to actually feel like they were getting a different kind of care when they were facing a life-changing illness. So it was going too slowly. I think that's what we're trying to say, that healthcare providers still don't have this care as a mandatory part of their formative years of training. And so we're still trying to chase our tail to try to catch up with already graduated healthcare providers, trying to convince them of the merits of providing a palliative approach. So we had a grand idea, a light bulb moment, um, where we thought, okay, we have to go directly to the consumer, the person and people who need this and deserve it without having an uncomfortable middle person who is still struggling around the words palliative, etc. Let's take the goodness of palliative care and a palliative approach, hospice care. Let's take that amazing care and offer it directly to the public. We thought it was going to be brilliant that we would just take what we do at end of life and offer it to the public directly. And San can chime in here.
Yes, and but when we brought that food truck, that end of life, that palliative care food truck upstream, we realized, oops, oh, I see what happens when I do the public, yeah, there was no lineup. The food truck is empty here, and it's because this is what's on the menu. Um, it's palliative care, it's palliative approach, palliative service. It's very, I want to say it's to patients and families who are already overwhelmed. The language is scary, and I think kind of didn't really care about the language. We just cared about the care, and so we needed to take a different approach. Um, and so the just so you know, just to sorry, I'm going to break out of our talk for a second, but the because I showed it in a slightly different way, it's not animated, okay, Sammy? So it'll just be like the slides. I think it'll be fine, but just be aware that it's going to come out slightly differently.
Okay.
it'll be fine, I think. So yeah, we were a little bit stuck actually, to be honest. And I think you all know, but we knew we had stories from thousands of patients, um, Sammy's thousands of patients at the bedside, that we knew that there was something there that we could harness to find a way forward.
Yeah. So I'll just summarize here. So Hsien and I wanted to influence citizens' illness journey right from the start of a diagnosis. That we knew that if we just tried to improve end of life care, that it wasn't going to solve the problems of why people journey through an illness, end up in the advanced stage, still feeling like they're dizzy, that they don't understand their illness, that they don't know what to expect. So, in order to improve that, we wanted to do something, an intervention, right from the beginning of diagnosis. And so, as Hsien said, we realized that it was right in front of us, that we, with the data that Hsien has gathered over decades of research and all the patient stories we were privy to, that we were sitting on a gold mine of intel that would help us understand the patient and family experience at the end of life, that would shed some light into earlier problems in the healthcare system, the things that went right and the things that went wrong for those patients and families. So that's what we did. We dove in deep and we realized very quickly that we could categorize patients and families into two main groups. The first group we call in the dark because we haven't come up with a better term for them. They seem to have an illness experience that was quite rocky, and this was the majority of people that we met at the end of life. They felt that they didn't recognize themselves as their illness went on, detached, out of control, frustrated, that their care journey was very reactive and bumpy. But the good news was that we found a smaller portion of people who were truly in the know. And these two groups could have the exact same illnesses, but their illness experience was completely different. The in the know folks recognized who they were the entire way, whether they were in the beginning, middle, late, or end stage of an illness, they felt they recognized themselves. They had agency. They felt that they had some sense of control. They were feeling grounded, informed, confident, and all the things that you can read up on the slide. So all we needed to do was figure out how to prevent people from being in the dark or shift people who were in the dark to being in the know. I hope you're following. And very quickly, 7 themes presented themselves, broke through all the data. 7 things, keys, mindsets, skills, whatever we want to call them, 7 differences between the in the dark and in the know folks that fundamentally made the illness experience either go down one road or the other road. And so we're going to tell you more about these.
Yeah, so these are the 7 keys. I know if you've heard us talk, we've gone through them. We're going to save talking about them in detail in the next section. But I think I just wanted to highlight that if you just quickly glance at the orange, keys, we called them keys because they unlocked an in the know experience, a better illness experience. And they're metaphors. Okay, they're simple metaphors. And I think what we realized was really um, it was the deconstructed elements of a palliative care approach in simple ways. And yeah, the language was simple, but approachable. They were simple actions that could be actually led by people living with an illness, caregivers, families, and healthcare providers. But we knew that patients, families, citizens had a big and important voice, and it would allow people to move upstream. So that any of those actions, and we'll talk about them in a second, didn't need someone to give permission or some kind of eligibility criteria or some kind of, as long as you were living this illness, you could be doing these things. So I think that was the powerful part about what we were trying to do. And so we sat there thinking, how do we get this information into the hands of citizens, patients, and families? And so we were trying to spread this, and we decided we learned that what we were really trying to do was create a social movement, which is an organized effort by a large group of people, but we're all working towards a similar goal. But individuals, organizations can take that information, make it their own in their own communities, and enact it, even in their own lives. So everyone doing a little bit makes a big collective effort. So that's what we are really trying to do after we sort of landed on the 7 keys. And we called our revolution the waiting room revolution, with the goal to put the human back at the center of care. Sammy, did you want to talk about where the name Waiting Room Revolution came from?
Sure. So waiting room, that title was from Kayla, one of the people who works on our team. And it was brilliant because the waiting room is both literal and metaphorically representing a real power gap between the patient and family and the healthcare provider who's behind the white door, the all-knowing person, and versus the people in the waiting room who are scared and wondering and unsure. And so our revolution is trying to close that gap, that we don't want the power to be solely in the hands of the healthcare providers. We are trying to give the power back, agency back to patients and families.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, so with this social movement, well, it's summarized on our website, waitingroomrevolution.com. And in these little circles here are lots of, different free tools and elements. I'll walk you through some of them, but really, we're going to highlight our story of how we spread this. But if you are interested, you can go back and click on some of these. But one of the things is that we did was we started a podcast in 2021 in the middle of COVID. We launched a podcast called the Waiting Room Revolution Podcast. It was our attempt to get our ideas out between the two of us, but also as a medium to share our message. And to be completely honest, we didn't know if anyone would listen, but lo and behold, we had listeners from Bow Valley who wrote us and said we love it, and more people listened. And season 1 of our podcast covers the 7 keys, and we have guests that illustrate the keys. So this was really our beginning. It is now 10 seasons in. We are listened to in over 100 countries. Lots of downloads, and in the top 1.5% of global podcasts. But in season 10, we're actually revisiting the 10 keys because we've learned a lot in these last 5 years and gotten a lot of questions about the keys. So we answer them in this season. So now is a perfect time to hop on if you like listening to podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
We also, Sammy, we also were on social media, and I wanted to. This is a new slide, but on that page we have, sometimes we get invited to on other people's podcasts, and I just wanted to flag that recently Sammy was on CBC's White Coat Black Art, hosted by Brian Goldman, and Brian followed Sammy for a day, and it was, such a great day, I guess, or there was so much in there that he made 2 episodes about it, and anyway, you'll be sick of hearing our voices, honestly. But this is a really good episode that really highlights, the ethos of what we did. And I think I wanted to put this on because I know some people on this call have really supported us to try to get on this show and get some coverage. So I want to thank Penny and other people who were writing Brian all the time saying, hey, get these guys on the show. So thank you. But it's a really nice 22 minutes of really summarizing the benefits of early palliative care and how to do it. But we're also on other social media platforms and other stuff. Do you want to talk about these, Sammy?
Yeah, I think, again, what we're going through right now are the various ways we try to get the content out into the world. It was one thing to sort out our stories and our data, find out that we had in the know and in the dark folks, and that we had these 7 amazing actionable keys that people could utilize to improve their illness experience. But it was a whole other challenge trying to deliver and get that content to the public. I mean, we usually are used to having, captured audiences of groups of healthcare providers, and we have access to those people. But it was beyond Hsien and me to know how to pump this out to the universe, which is why Hsien is sharing with you the various ways we tried with a website, with the podcast, with being on other people's podcasts, going out and doing talks as much as we could, um, being on social media. All these were ways for us to pump, 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 send signals out to the world to see if it's resonating with people. Are we getting any traction? Is this content that people want? Um, so we ended up developing some free resources on our website, and this is one of them. The one I think it's to your left is a cream colored one. This is the 7 keys for patients and families. It is we call them the one pager. It just summarizes the 7 keys. And more recently, we made 7 keys, which is the Navy one for healthcare providers, because we realized into our revolution, we call our social movement our revolution, that healthcare providers were eating up the content as well, that they too found usefulness in the content. And so we started thinking about, well, what's our responsibility to go back to healthcare providers actually and make sure that they're ready for a tsunami of new patients and families with a new vibe to come their way, and that they too could use this content because it feels better, it's more accessible, it's more uh, it feels more natural, the kinds of words and language we use, instead of them trying to say, when should I start palliative care? How should I start palliative care? Do I use the word? Do I not use the word? So healthcare providers were tickled pink to get a one pager as well.
Yeah. And perhaps some of you on the call know, but we were in the Bow Valley, I think October 2 years ago, but and in a beautiful storm, but the a snowstorm. But we had a book. Our first book 18 months ago was Hope for the Best, Plan for the Rest. I know the Hospice Society has books on copy. They're lending them out. It's ebook. It's at the library, etc. But this has been um, uh, really exciting to have this first book out into the world and people reading it and saying it helped them right away. And it was like an action plan. It was like a guidebook of a roadmap of what to do. Um, so that has been exciting. And with that, we've been giving talks and people have read it and said they had a lot of questions and they kept saying, I wish there was, well, they asked for a workbook, frankly, and a course and, and a lot of questions that we got at some of these talks. And so I think this is really, what
Yeah,
we're, yeah,
you are on some kind of view that's showing your computer, like thumbnails and
yeah, it's
I,
it's not the screen. So if you would like, I can pause and try and switch it over, but I will lose seeing you, but that's okay.
okay.
Does
I
it
mean, you
is it
don't have
bothering
to.
anybody else? We might be okay. I know it's crazy, right? It's when you try to innovate and do it slightly different, then always mess up. Okay, well, why don't you tell the story of why we wrote the workbook while I sort this out?
Okay. Why did
Thank
we
you.
write the workbook? Well, okay, so yeah, when we were out and about giving talks places and people were reading our book, they kept wanting more. They kept saying like, "Do you have a workbook? Do you have a workshop? Is there a course I can take? I just want more." And the other thing was, as Cian said, when we were out talking to groups, after a while, we realized we are getting almost the same questions from the audience, everywhere we go. So they became our frequently asked questions. And we decided to create this workbook and include in the workbook in every section the frequently asked questions about the 7 keys, each one of them. So that's why we did the workbook. And the workbook actually just came out about 4 weeks ago. So I see some of you have the workbook, which is amazing. And you would be some of the first people to touch the workbook. And so the workbook is meant for patients and caregivers, but we're also learning that healthcare providers, could utilize the workbook as well in working with their patients and families. So this has been great, and it's a companion workbook to the book, but it certainly can stand alone on its own as well. Here comes
Think this works. Oh, I'm sorry, everyone. When you try to start out the technical. Okay, does it now get a full screen?
No, now put it on presentation mode.
It is on presentation mode on my screen.
If you, okay.
Ah,
Did you, okay.
I did. I don't know what happens. When I put it on presentation mode, I lose you all. Okay, here we go. Oh, share. Here we go. Share screen two. Ta-da. Yes, maybe.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Oh my goodness gracious. All right,
Okay,
everyone.
we're at the
We're gonna get.
workbook.
You can now give the talk. Here we go. See how the end. Okay. So here's the good news. I know the Hospice Society has copies of this workbook that people have. If you have one, you can follow along. But what we're gonna do maybe for the next little bit is tell you what is inside this, our favorite parts, because this, and as we do that, we'll talk about the keys. So if you're new to the keys, you'll learn about them and then also how the workbook fits in. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So the very first key, I'm going to pass it to Sammy because this is her favorite one, but we actually, and if you go right to the beginning, before our key, it's the high level concept of people being in the dark to in the know. So I think we talked a little bit about that with the arrows. There's two groups. So we really just explain, we followed the book, the workbook follows the book and really just explains what you can do with it. So maybe I'll go to the next slide, which talks about on page 8 of the workbook, it has one of these exercises. I think on my slides, I just show one of our favorite exercises from each chapter.
Okay, so getting set up for being in the know means that a patient and family should be invited to understand the nature of their illness. So in this exercise, we help compare whether or not someone has a chronic illness, like something they're going to have forever, but it might not get worse over time and it might not shorten their life. Like, for example, psoriasis. Or is their illness progressive, like osteoarthritis? As you get older, your arthritis can get worse and it's chronic, but it doesn't shorten your life expectancy. But some illnesses are progressive and life limiting. They shorten your life expectancy. And all too often, we are calling some of these illnesses chronic instead of progressive and life limiting or life changing. So we are encouraging patients and families to do this exercise, circle what their understanding is of their illness, whether it's chronic, progressive, or life limiting, and to check in with their healthcare provider to see if they're on the same page. Like I said, worst case scenario, someone thinks that their illness is chronic and doesn't understand why it's getting worse. And they're so frustrated. And every change that happens is an emergency. And they go to the ER because they can't understand why it's getting worse. So, right from the time of diagnosis, we're encouraging people, not forcing people, but inviting people to understand whether or not they have one of these common illnesses that truly will change from early to beginning to advanced to late stage. So this is one exercise in becoming in the know. And then the other exercise in this section, again, we're setting the stage for open, truthful conversation about the reality, is we're trying to assess a patient and family's readiness to have open conversation. So we're inviting them to score how important it is to have information about the reality and how ready they are to learn more about their illness and how much of their nature it is to seek information. Because if they score sort of on the left side, they're more likely to have an in the dark illness experience. If they circle and score more on the right side, the good news is they're more likely to be on the track of being in the know. So this is one way, again, it's a conversation starter with their healthcare provider that about the nature of their illness and, you know, are they the type of person, the phenotype that is more likely to be in the know or in the dark? And let's talk about that. So these are just a few choice
Hmm.
exercises. There's more in the workbook, of course, and the
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. And so we talked a little, I mean, our very first key is now we're sort of getting into the seven keys, is called walk two roads. Hope for the best. The two roads are hoping for the best and planning for the rest at the same time. We can, um, hoping, hope doesn't betray planning. You know, they can coexist. We can do two things, and the nature of our hope can evolve as things in the illness change. So, to help people do that, and we get a common question, which was, how do we, if I conceptually understand this, what are some simple things I can do? So, we just put an exercise here about thinking about what you're hoping for and what you might be worried about in a very hope approachable way, simple way. And we just put in some examples here. That's one of the exercises. So if you're just wanting to, begin this process gently, this exercise is a nice one for you. And then once you start to write out your hopes, some of your worries, you can start to let your mind wander that if something that you're worried about happens, what could you do now to start to prepare? And if you're not sure of what are some of the things you might do, this is exactly where you could lean on the volunteers, your hospice society, to say, hey, other people in this situation, what are things they might want to prepare for? Um, and so we just give an example in the exercise here. If um, if they aren't able to care for themselves at home, well, they can think about, what services are in my community? Are there other care settings I need to look into? Should I visit them? Should I find out how much they cost? Can I move in with another family member? Will they come and live with me? Should I live with them? All of these things are things that you may want to just gently explore at your readiness. But the worst thing that can happen is if one of these things happen and you haven't really thought about it and started to learn about what are your options. Okay, so these are just examples of the exercises in Walk Two Roads.
So each of these is to nudge, nudge, nudge gently, encourage patients and families to have the skills that the in the know folks had. That's if we're still all on the same page here. So zoom out was another skill that people who were in the know could do. Um, they could go through the day-to-day busyness of their illness, but at times they would try to get a big picture view of what's going on. And so in the workbook, we have a couple of exercises that can help people get that information from their healthcare provider without being met with sayings like, oh, we'll cross that bridge when it comes, or we don't have a crystal ball. I can't possibly tell you, about the future of your illness. Because so many illnesses do have a very well-known storyline called the natural history of the illness, and people have the right to access that information. And the in the know folks were able to do that. They asked about that kind of thing. And so in the exercise, in the workbook, we encourage people to take these questions to a healthcare provider. Where are we at now in the big picture of this illness? What can we do now to be as well as possible? What are common signs of the illness worsening? What are important things to prepare for next? And what organizations and resources can support us? These, again, are meant to be conversation starters. Healthcare providers can sometimes be so busy and so in the weeds, so worried about opening up Pandora's box that patients and families don't get opportunities to ask these questions. So we want to legitimize and encourage patients to do this, zooming out and asking these big picture questions. Next one, Hsien.
Yeah, I think I'm just looking, because we could talk about this book for hours. It just came out, I think a month ago, so we're really excited. And each of the chapters, there's a reflection, there's the exercises, and then we answer some frequently asked questions, and maybe we'll get some of those questions, once we do this presentation. But we just have a few other ways that people might be able to zoom out. If you are a healthcare provider or if you're a patient or family, these are some categories that people wish they had thought about sooner in living arrangements, caregiving, getting support, etc. So this is sort of a checklist or a conversation started to be like, hey, I never thought about some of these things, and maybe what do I need to know about this now or later?
I like to call that zooming broadly because it's beyond just like the biomedical physical. Those categories are, zooming out in different ways. That those things are still really important.
I think maybe for this one, I'm going to show the example of when you want to talk about the Alzheimer's example and then the other ones, and then at the end, I think I summarize with the generic
Yes,
one.
sure. So in this chapter, we also talk about the illness roadmaps. So as I mentioned before, every progressive life-limiting illness has a roadmap, a storyline, because billions of people have had that particular illness. So it's well characterized. So we are trying to work through a roadmap so that people can get the big picture of their particular illness. So this one we worked together with Health Canada and people from the Alzheimer's Society. We had patients, families, family doctors, geriatricians helping us to map out what is the general storyline of Alzheimer's. And so you see on the left there, uh, we have the beginning, middle, late, and end stage categories, and what are the kinds of things a person might experience. And on the right-hand side there, we have in the beginning, middle, and late stage again, the different life changes that are going to happen because you have Alzheimer's. And the right-hand side of that are the things that you should be thinking about in the beginning, middle, late, and end stage with respect to key life changes. So provides like a very condensed snapshot into Alzheimer's, and people would be able to look at this and say, oh, my loved one's actually in this stage because of this. And oh, dear, I better think of these things to think about. So we have done this for Alzheimer's and COPD and ALS and ovarian cancer. And we're going to try our hardest to continue down the list of progressive illnesses. Um, this one's for ALS, and then we can go to the next one.
I did it, yeah, COPD.
COPD,
And
yeah.
this is the generic one, yeah.
And then because we're not working fast enough, it takes some time. We if someone says, well, I'd like to know more about Parkinson's. I want the roadmap for Parkinson's. Well, we created a generic roadmap, one that's not filled in for a specific illness. And so if they could get access to the other ones, which are on our website for free, some of them are also in French, they could just take one, like let's say they could take the COPD one and then take this blank one and go to their, let's say, doctor and say, I'd like to fill this out for Parkinson's. Um, Again, it's us nudging them towards an understanding that there are stages with this illness. It does not just stay the same, that there's value in preparing.
Yeah, and I saw Lynn, I think, not to call you, but I could see you looking at your screen. These are all free downloadable on our website. You just go to resources. I think we collect your email and then you have access to all of these. So anything that looks pretty is probably on our website for free. The third key is about knowing your style. And I think we just had such a clear signal that, well, people die as they live, but also how they face challenges in their past is going to influence their illness. People are who they are. And so to help people gain that insight into their own personality or their loved one's personality, we just made a little quick quiz, it's not quite a personality quiz, but these 8 traits were the things that we thought had the most impact on an illness. And I think in the actual tool there's an other category, so if there's something or other, this is just an example. But there's, for example, information seeking style. That's the very top one. Are you the kind of person who waits to be told, or are you a super seeker? how do you like information? Do you like things sugar coated or you like things straight up? So these are just a simple exercise to identify your own traits. There's no right or wrong, but at the end of this, in the workbook and on again, we have a one pager. It kind of just tells you what are the the pros of having that approach, and maybe some of the things you need to watch out for. Again, no right or wrong. Every style has some positive things and maybe some things you need to, if you go too far, you have to be worried about. So this is useful not just for the patient to do, the person with the illness to do, but a family member could do it for the patient, or you could also do this for your inner crew, because I think you're a team. And how we're going to go through this together is important. And I think the whole point of this is to think of my style, how that plays out in my illness, but also how do I mix and match? If I know this is going to be something I have to worry about, like, for example, I'm very indecisive, then I need to partner with people in my crew who can help me make decisions or talk it out with, so they're going to help me. This is, getting the right team for you, the right support system for you. That's all know your style.
Mhm. The next one is customize your order. So this one is the fourth key. And this is about uh, stepping forward as a unique person. So making sure that you are not considered just another chocolate coming down the belt line, that you're not an apple like everyone else, that you're different and you want to be treated differently. And so we want to encourage patients and families to bring themselves forward to every healthcare encounter, with the essence of them. So we asked them to document on page 49 what matters to them most and why, what brings them joy, what gives their life meaning, um, that what would they not want to give up. Hsien's making me go faster because he's controlling the slides. Okay. And exercise 5.2 on page 52. We can go deeper into, some of the priorities that will help guide the patient and family. Again, you can read the list, it's in your book, but this customize your order again serves multiple purposes. One is to be seen as unique and have a bespoke illness experience. And the other is because if they know themselves really well, they're in a better position, and same with their decision makers, to make informed decisions in the future based on their values, and what's important to them. And they're in Customize Your Order, we also talk about different roles that people will have in the informal team. And one of them is identifying your substitute decision maker. And most people don't even know who that person is. And every province is different in terms of how they go about this. In Ontario, there is a hierarchy of substitute decision makers that are your default people in your life if you don't choose someone. But anyway, instead of just having someone, you know, um, serendipitously your substitute decision maker, or just assuming, for example, my husband is my substitute decision maker, we want to make sure that they have the right qualities to be your substitute decision maker. It's not the person who loves you the most and cares for you the most. It's the person who understands your wishes, that you trust to make decisions on your behalf and not from their heart. I always joke that I wouldn't want my mom to be my substitute decision maker because she loves me more than anything in the world, but she would keep me alive at all cost, brushing my hair, putting nail polish on, like until I'm 400 years old. So she's out. You, so people need to know how to pick their substitute decision maker that's going to reflect their values and wishes.
Yeah, and I think these are all just little nudges to, in approachable ways that get people thinking about this and talking about it. Looking at the time, we'll keep going because there's a few other, but ripple effects is just if someone has an illness, there's ripples in their life, and the family, their inner crew, we call them, are affected. There will be people affected. They go on a parallel illness journey. And so we just talk about helping people think about, proactively think about who is in my first, second, and third ring. And there's a little exercise to just write out the names of, who is closest, how will they be affected, um, and who supports them in the second ring, and who's in the community, in the broader community, who could also be tapped on. And I think that's where you're very lucky to have an amazing hospice society that can come in and move in between these rings. We go further thinking about who are the people who will support, what are some of the common roles in exercise 6.2 that you may not realize that you might need some of these things at some point, and who do you think would be the people in your inner crew that you might tap on for that, and maybe having a conversation about, hey, are you able to help me do this? Is this something you're able to do or willing to do? Will you, be part of my team, kind of thing? And recognizing the person closest is probably this thing called the caregiver, the main caregiver, and supporting them so that they're not doing all 9 of these things by themselves. And yeah, so that's just an example of some of the exercise we do to try to call attention to that the inner crew has a role in this. And there's more exercise. We're just giving you a quick taste.
This is like a whirlwind introduction to the workbook. We're not expecting you to do the exercises while we're whipping through these. But anyway, connect the dots is the 6th key. And it is about helping patients and families understand that there is a role that they need to take on as the quarterback of their journey. And so there is a role for them to self-manage and to make sure that things don't get lost. And as much as we might think, oh, well, that's not fair, patients and families shouldn't have to do that, but the ones who were in the know did do that. So we're trying to encourage people to connect the dots. So one of the things that is helpful to be able to self-manage is to identify a manager in your informal layers. So those layers, those first, second, third rings that Hsien was talking about, that identify the person's inner crew or informal care team. Hopefully someone has the style that they would be a good manager, if not the patient themselves. So this exercise helps them to pick someone who might be a good candidate for that role.
And last but not least, just invite yourself is just the recognition that you shouldn't, wait to be invited to these conversations. The people who had the best illness experience found their voice, asked questions, were gently fierce, so to speak. This idea of the good patient who doesn't rock the boat, are maybe easier to care for, but don't always get the best personalized care experience for them. And so we try to, define the difference between being passive, respectfully assertive, or gently fierce versus aggressive. We're not suggesting people be aggressive or demand, things from the healthcare system, but rather to assert themselves in a respectful way. And so we help people to kind of see that. We have some exercises, I think, about asking open-ended questions, about some tips on how you can make the most of your appointments. There's some very simple things, but it really is some of the best advice we've seen from talking to hundreds and hundreds of healthcare providers and patients. And last but not least, the putting it all together, this is the culminating exercise, our favorite one.
Yeah. So the whole workbook works towards this exercise where a person can document at the back of the book or download this from our website and fill this out and bring it to every encounter that they have with the healthcare system, which is basically, we call it my big picture, but we could probably name it lots of different things. But it says, this is who I am. This is my understanding of my illness. These are the key members in my inner crew, calling out the caregiver, the manager, the substitute decision maker, and other key people. This is how I want to engage with you, walk 2 roads. I want hopeful, realistic, honest, open, or sugar-coated kind of communication, that this is my style you should know about in terms of me wanting to plan into the future or how much information I want, um, how I like to have conversations, and then zooming out, how important it is for me to know the big picture, blah, 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 blah. You can read it all there. But basically, this is meant to, again, close the gap between patients and families wanting and knowing that they are entitled to have this information and these conversations with a healthcare layer, a system that is uncomfortable with this stuff. And in the default is they just get busier, keep their heads down, and grind. And so this document is to ensure that the person is seen as unique, and I have the right to open, honest communication about the big picture of my illness, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so I will maybe talk about what is happening next for maybe 2 minutes, and then I'll take on the slides and we can open up to questions. I know we've been talking for a while, but as you can see, we're excited. This workbook just came out a month ago, and we really think that as you sort of listened, it could be like a book club. It's like a course kind of. And so we are launching uh, in less than a month a workshop in a box. It will be available on our website, and the workshop in a box um, is really designed so that we call them ambassadors, but people in your community can teach this content, can help have classes like a book club where they can, yes, I see Lynn giving a thumbs up, could go through the workbook and go, chapter by chapter or spend an afternoon doing this. So we are giving away this workshop in a box. It will have a facilitator guide. We're working on that now. This is sort of a draft cover. It will have a lesson plan for each of the keys, not for the people taking it, but for the person teaching it. It will have slides, speaker notes, very simple slides, maybe some videos that we have yet to create, sample agendas to, do it in 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, different, timings, and then answers to some frequently asked questions about how to run this. The workshop in the box will also have marketing materials, an evaluation, QR code thing, and then an ambassador welcome kit to find out how to get books at a discount, and also joining the community of other ambassadors who are teaching and sharing this information. So this is fine. We just finalized June 12th and 13th. We're having 2 webinars, the same webinar, a global launch. So before that, it's coming up. You can sign up this is really I'm looking to Bill and his team, but this is really our vision for how we're going to empower you all to be equipped to be proper ambassadors so that you can spread the message, but also connect to all the other amazing work that you're doing. So I think our conclusion is really everyone is part of the revolution. I know many of the folks on this call, I see the names. You are ambassadors, and we're just trying to create more tools to make it easier for you to share not just this work, but all the work that you're doing, so that people find you earlier, can take advantage of the amazing volunteers and community, but also be a part of the community and donate to your society, et cetera. So to strengthen, where they live and work. So I'm not going to worry about the QR code. Maybe I'll put, this is supposed to be the evaluation. I'll put that in the chat, but maybe I'll take the slides down now, finally, and we can answer some questions that people have.
Before we jump to our participants, Hsien, I do really want to thank you and Sammy for giving us sort of a reasonably expedited tour through the workbook. And I went through it again this week in preparation for a conversation, and I think you offer us a tool here that isn't only useful for patients and their families and clinicians, but what an incredible invitation to self-awareness and exploration for the public as a whole. I have a couple of questions for you before I open it up. And one of those is you're in season 10 of Waiting Room Revolution, over 100 episodes. From all of those conversations and interviews, do you have a story that stands out? Is it like when somebody says, "Hey, Hsien, Waiting Room Revolution, conversations," is there something immediately comes to your mind, you or Sammy, that's like, yeah, that's a story that really stands out for us?
I was putting the link in the chat, so I'm going to let Sammy answer first.
Okay, fair
But I
enough.
put an evaluation link in the chat and I made a mistake, so ignore the sages. Anyway, you people will
It's
see
all
and
good.
see.
Thank you. Sammy, then, is there a story that stands out for you?
You know what? We had a gentleman who joined us on one of the podcasts. His name was Steven Starkman, and he had a diagnosis of cancer. And he wanted to be on our podcast so badly because he felt, he really appreciated the keys, and he just loved the content. So we had him on our podcast, and I wanted to find out, how did it go? How did it go when he tried them out with his family, with his healthcare provider? And I was so surprised. He said, I haven't. And we had a whole conversation about, but Stephen, you said you love this content, and what's the issue here? And we spent the whole episode coaching him on how to get from just thinking the content resonated with him to action. And then we had him back another time, and he told us about the difference it made for him. And then he ended up passing away. And his wife wrote us the most beautiful letter about how it changed the course of the way he experienced his illness. And I just think many of the people we have on our podcast, we only get to interface with once, but I feel like there was a little bit of a story there. And it was early enough in our social movement that, it was very impactful that it resonated with a patient because, we think this is going to be helpful, but he confirmed that, and he admitted he didn't know how to operationalize it. Then he did. It made such a big difference. And then he passed. And then his wife was so grateful. It just was very touching and
Mm,
affirming.
wow, thank you for that.
Mhm.
I mean,
Hsien,
yeah,
yeah,
I
how
don't know
about
if there
you?
any one stories, but to be honest, when I look at this, like I've had emails from folks on this call who have shared their personal stories, and I won't do that because that's not my story to tell, who have told us the impact of the work. And really, that's what keeps us going because we spend, Sammy was texting me at 6 o'clock saying, send me the slides. I'm like, I am still sleeping. But this is what this is just how we work because we are very busy. But what keeps us going are the emails that I answered the phone, so I was actually awake, but it's because it pinged. But anyway, so it's not Sammy's fault. But I was like, I want to sleep till 7, please. But the people write us and they use words like they felt empowered, they felt like they were unfrozen. They were stuck, and not just themselves, but them and their family just didn't know what to do. And so that's what just keeps us going, I think. And it's just giving people language and the permission that they don't have to just do this alone, but also feel like there are no words to help them take control back. I think that's what it's really about, choice and control. When we have information, it's the power to be in the know. We cannot change the illness, but we can change the experience. And that's what we've heard over and over and again. Even for people who say, I'm so overwhelmed. We had a caregiver of somebody with late stage dementia. She's like, I'm day to day. I'm so overwhelmed. Like I really can't even think by tomorrow. But her book was highlighted, dog-eared, and she had questions that she was going to ask her provider. She's like, I didn't know I could ask this, and the next time I go, I'm definitely going to ask this because I can't believe I don't know the answer to this. So there are little steps along the way, little questions and nudges that can help people just be more informed and feel more like themselves. I think that's really it because I know I'm talking to Bill the Guru, but illness, loss, this is a part of life. It's a hard part of life, though, and we don't get a lot of training in it. So I think this is how we've unlocked the intel that people have shared to say, how can we do this better? And it's through asking, what patients and families have control over is information, where they can get it. And it doesn't have to be from the formal healthcare system. I've totally gone off, Bill, from your question. It can be from the hospice societies, from the volunteers, from the disease sites groups. There's so much intelligence and support that's in the communities that we just it's been lost and hidden, and I think that's why it's so great to be here today.
Thank you for that. Really appreciate that. We have a comment from Diane. She said, I find clients often don't know what they don't know. And your tools in the workbook provide an opportunity for self-awareness, for us to have questions to ask. We have some questions from the group that's in person in our boardroom. And so maybe Chin, if you can just help us to get to the boardroom and unmute them so that they can voice their questions. Go ahead.
Me. Yeah. Oh, it's me. I'm on. I have a question about, have you used this very much or have you heard back at all with chronic mental illnesses?
Hmm. Go ahead, Sam.
Great question. We have a mental illness example in our book, and it was inspired by our podcast episode with person Marianne Lavasseur. And what I think it's season 6 or something. You can look for that, but she talks about and intellectual development disabilities and different things. What we have learned is, again, as we sort of told our story, we started, our expertise is end of life and dying, but actually this book is about how to be a patient, how to interface with a complex health system. And so any illness, whether it's chronic or progressive or life limiting, these are skills on how to like get information. Frankly, if you we hope people could be cured from their illness, but they still, when they get the diagnosis, their life changes. They're scared. They don't know what to ask. So I think these skills are absolutely applicable, and we've been working with different pediatrics, different communities to try to get it out. But of course, our whole vision is we give these keys so that people can take it and adapt it. I hope that answered your
Thank you,
question.
Hsien. Hsien, we had a couple of questions that were sent in ahead of time. One is how to discuss and prep for a long haul illness like Parkinson's.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, Parkinson's has an average life expectancy that's well documented. I won't just blurt it out because, I always check on someone's readiness to know that information, but it is an illness that can easily be categorized as just chronic, but it does change over time. There are chapters of Parkinson's. And so, at the beginning, when someone is diagnosed with Parkinson's, it's really about making sure that they know that they have a right to ask about what does Parkinson's look like in each of the chapters. What are the features of Parkinson's that define that it's middle of the story or later in the story? What are the kinds of things that I need to prepare for? In a way, when the illnesses have a long landing strip, like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, they're longer progressive illnesses. Um, it's so easy just to think they're chronic, but they do change over time. And I suppose as hard as it is to have a very long landing strip illness, um, it does afford the person the I don't want to sound trite here, but
Time.
it does afford the person the luxury of time uh, versus a sudden death. So if someone can
Yeah.
come prepared, they have that currency, which is time to spend however they want, and not look back and say, I wish, I regret, I should have, I could have. But with Parkinson's and some of the other longer ones like Alzheimer's, for all of these illnesses, it's as much about the family as it is about the actual patient. And the longer an illness lasts, um, the caregiver really needs to be brought into the care fold because they have a parallel illness experience. So I would say information is people's superpower. So the more information, the more time you're going to put as currency in your wallet and be able to use it. The more proactive you can be, the better you can plan, and you will avoid thinking every change is another crisis. So it can calm the whole environment down by asking questions, getting information, and using your time.
Yeah, I would just add to that exactly. The longer the illness, the more important, I think, or maybe uh, the more valuable being prepared is going to be, because it's for a longer haul. If it's just sort of a short term, you can sort of juggle many things, but the longer it is, you really want to be prepared. And I think it's important. So on our website, I would suggest that the Alzheimer's roadmap is probably the most comparable. And in that roadmap, it has things to look for and things to prepare for in each stage. And those were created by patients, families, healthcare providers, of things that I wish I had done in the early stage that I didn't know I didn't know. Um, so like the ovarian cancer one in the early stage, they talked about fertility preservation. They were just so running through, and then they're like, oh man, I wish I thought about that because now I'm there. So I think, and I think the other thing I just wanted to emphasize was when people who walk two roads and make a plan or entertain that other road, they don't spend all their time worrying and planning. Now that they know, they've thought about it, they've got some ideas, now they can go back to being what making choices about what they want to do. So I think the planning is about so that they're not caught off guard for the expected changes that are going to happen.
Thank you for that. I'm going to scoot us back to the boardroom for a minute. We have another question from our live group, or in-person, sorry, group. Everybody's live.
Everyone's live.
Yes, thank you. I'm looking at this workbook. It's really awesome, and thank you for that. I have a question is, do you have a suggestion as to when to start this work? Is it only at the diagnosis or prior to a diagnosis?
Yeah, that's a really, I want to say, what do you think? I get the feeling you might think, or you wonder if it might be helpful even before diagnosis, just for like anyone. Yeah, because when we're going to healthcare providers to tell them about the workbook, we're actually having them fill out some of the exercises for themselves before they have an illness. Reflect on who's in your crew, reflect on who would be your illness manager. What is your personality doctor? How does that impact? So I believe there is a rule for the workbook to be filled out by people who might not be, diagnosed yet, for sure. It's definitely a workbook that will help you be a patient in the future, or a caregiver in the future, even if you're not in those roles now, but you might not be able to fill out the specifics of the illness that you have. I use these concepts all the time in my just everyday life, to the point where my daughters are on to me. They'll say, I know, let's zoom out about the consequences of blah, blah, blah. Or so I think these are just really good ways to live your best life, really, some of these concepts. But I'd be interested to know, if you decide to do the workbook yourself, you could give us feedback, because that would be amazing to know.
Yeah, I think what we found is the
Yeah.
keys, these skills are helpful to navigate a complex system. And many of us find ourselves, if we don't have a diagnosis yet, as a support person. And maybe even in the third ring of somebody who's ill and you're trying to figure out how to help them. You're either an immediate caregiver or you volunteer your time in an amazing organization and want to help others. So this helps you have a framework to coach other people, I think. But yeah, but there are a lot of what we have found is the people who come to our events who don't yet have a diagnosis, it's because they know they've seen other people who have gone through it and are like, I don't want it to be like that. So how do I make it different? And this is where I think that's value. But to be completely honest, I think what we have found is people are the most motivated to really think about this and get into action when there's an impetus, a burning platform, and that's when the diagnosis happens. So I think it's obviously we can think about what's important to us and we can, have a substitute decision maker, but all of that is missing the context of what disease, illness, what are we talking about? So I don't think it's bad to do it early, but I think when people, and not just at diagnosis, any point from that point all the way, and beyond, frankly, for the people for bereavement, it's there's no wrong time, but anytime after, when people are living with it, I think it's when they're ready to start saying, what can I do now?
I think that's a good point, Sian, about using it to help you coach other people. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to use that next time.
I have another question that was sent in ahead of time. And this participant said, I was diagnosed as stage 3 cancer and need a direction. And it seems the entire conversation this morning is ripe with that question in the background.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, no time like the present to start reclaiming control, and working, whether you're early, just diagnosed, early stage, whatever stage, it's never too late to start, working through some of these exercises, because our sense from people is that it really does give you a sense of control and feel like you can land on your 2 feet and move forward. So I encourage that person to read the book. I think you will find it comforting, is what I think.
Yeah, and I think what we've realized is, just like the book, it's a lot to digest. So I don't think anyone expects anyone to sit through and do it all from beginning to end. You would sort of take it the pieces and sort of just go through at your own pace, or maybe we actually say some of the questions to ask your health provider might take a couple visits, but it's not overwhelming, and we really tried to focus it on things that we thought would be the most impactful that complement the book, but you can read this on its own. Um, and what did I wanted to say something else about I forgot. Oh, the other thing that we did not highlight is we've done quite a number of talks. Just we've been very lucky to be able, but we answer the most frequently asked questions for each of the keys. So
I
we
told
didn't,
them.
yeah, we
I
haven't actually gotten one of the most common questions, but we often get questions like, what if one person wants to know and the other doesn't? How do I deal with that? So I'm a caregiver and I want to know, but the person with the illness doesn't. So how do we deal with that? Or, we get very common questions. So we tried to address those in a simple way, which again could help you if you are a volunteer coaching or if you're living it, and trying to figure out how do I apply this. We've addressed the most common questions for each key. What do you say, Sammy, when someone wants to know? Well, let's just answer that one. The if someone wants to know and someone's not ready, how do you balance? How do you navigate that?
Well, first, I gently name it. I think that's the most helpful thing is not to be all confused and stressed out in your own mind. Me as a doctor, I usually say, I really appreciate that people are here with different um, stages of readiness to talk about X, Y, or Z. And you all matter and you all count, and everyone's on their own timeline, and there's no right or wrong. So for those of you who want to know, move right. And those of you who don't want to know, no, I don't do that. But it's usually the people who want to know that get really anxious about those people who don't want to know. And they feel they have to force those people to know to get them out of denial. And those people aren't usually in denial, which, if you take the strictest definition, is someone who doesn't believe they have what they have. Most people aren't like that. That's very rare. If people aren't ready, it's usually because that is their style. They are on a different timeline. Their mind and their body are in different places. And for many people, it is a strong coping mechanism. It's a layer that they need at that time. So the goal isn't to chip away at people who don't want to know. Not everyone has to know, and certainly not everyone is on the same timeline. So we really try to respect that most people will, when they're ready, seek the information that they need at that time. I hope that helps.
Thank you for that.
Mm.
Another question. In exercise 2.4 in your workbook, you mention the other road, and that it appears that sometimes the patient or a family member is in the role of mentoring the healthcare professional on how to be in the conversation. Would you just comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, that came from so many people saying, oh, well, I've tried that before. And my doctor, I'll just blame the doctors. My doctor, you can't even get them to stop for 2 seconds. And that their hands on the door, or they don't have time. I can see they're rushing. And, I don't want to be, um, aggressive. And there's this conflict between what the patients and families want and need from, I'll just say the doctor again, and the doctor's busyness and, task at hand. So we help the patients and families understand their doctor's behavior. It's like how to train your doctor. If you notice this about your doctor, this is what might be happening. So try this. And so we go through that because, yeah, I mean, the system has different things that it prioritizes. And we'll take a well-intended healthcare provider who went into their role because they really wanted to care for someone and turn them into someone who feels like they're in a transactional business model. And so, unfortunately, healthcare providers are feeling more transactional than they are relational. And so, what patients and families are often picking up on is this robot of a doctor, just not seeing them as a person and their needs. And so, hopefully, um, we're wondering if our work is going to help actually put the human back in the healthcare provider as well and help them reclaim relational work instead of just feeling it always has to be transactional in nature.
Yeah. And I would just say the whole chapter, Invite Yourself, actually has every exercise is really geared to helping you find a voice and ways, tips, things to change the regular flow. And frankly, the whole my big picture, instead of bringing, hey, I read these 4 clinical trials, like, are they relevant to me? If you gave them that one page of my big picture and said, you need to read this, like, this is what you need to know about me, you've already, you know, sort of, how do I say, you've invited them into the conversation. And some of these things they're tiptoeing around because they don't know what you know and they don't want to give you a prognosis if you don't know and da, da, da. But you've said, hey, no, you've laid it all out there. So if you are willing, able, comfortable putting out my big picture, it already says a lot about you. That's going to change, hopefully, the conversation. We're really not just, trying to fill out books, but we're really trying to change is the conversation starters and change the flow. We're kind of short circuiting the way things work. Frankly, outside the health system too. I keep thinking if you keep bumping into that provider, you can find a new one and sometimes you can't, but there are other great people in the system, nurses, social workers, again, the hospice society that can give you advice on what you need to know to do this well. So yeah.
Thank you. We draw near the end of our time. I just wanted to see, are there other questions from our group? Feel free to unmute and ask or put up your hand
Or even comments
or comments.
or feedback for better or worse.
Yes, Lynn. I see Lynn wants to say something.
Lynn, you have to take
You're
your
still muted, love. Yeah.
Yeah, when you scroll to, there's a mouse at the bottom. I know, don't worry, I had a lot of tech issues. At the bottom, the thing will come up and it'll be like audio. Yeah, there you go.
You're good.
This is just truly wonderful. My goodness gracious. It's like a dream come true. I want to thank both of you. How do I register for the facilitators course as I live in assisted living here in Canmore and I'm an adult educator and I have the opportunity to present the rest of your ideas. I've already done style, but it's also open to the community. And palliative care is my special baby, and she's growing so beautifully. And I thank you. Just wondering how I can register for the course to become a facilitator. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome. On our website, we have an events tab. It is not up yet, but right after this call, I'm going to get my team to put it up and you can just register yourself on the events tab of our
Thank you.
And if you join our newsletter, you'll get emails about it. We every Tuesday in the spring and fall. But on our website, the events tab, yeah.
And what is that? I'm sorry, I'm just holding on to my computer skills by my fingernails, and they're not very long, but I'm trying.
Oh,
What
I'm
is
gonna put the date is Thursday and Friday, June 12th and 13th,
Yeah.
12 to 1 Eastern Standard Time. So you're
Eastern
10
Standard,
to
yes.
11. And I
Great.
just put the events tab in there, but it has other events. So that
Okay.
is the link, though.
I'll get the website. Yeah. Thanks.
Someone else
Thank
is
you,
asking.
Lynn.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
We have just we're gonna get the boardroom and then Penny and then we'll see.
Okay, go Val. Okay, well, I just want to give a big shout out to the people who wrote the book, Sammy, and I'm a bit nervous, so you'll have to help me. What's the other name?
Hsien, yeah.
I
Don't
talked
be
to Becky
nervous.
about this yesterday. I feel incredibly fortunate because I know Penny Gall and I know Rosemary Bolton, and I have my team here who, these people are kind of my village. But Penny was the one that when I got my early diagnosis in December, late December, she kind of calmed me down and she said, now this is what you're going to do. You're going to look at what you have. Fortunately, mine was not life-threatening, but it was still an early journey into the cancer world. So I took some time to read your book and to listen to your podcast. There was a lot of information for me at the beginning. And as it was Christmas, I needed to sort of put it aside because I had family coming from overseas. But it was a lot to deal with. But when I listened to the podcast and I went back to some of the chapters, I found it so comforting to read. And it's just the way it's written. For someone who's not in medicine, and I haven't had a lot of experience with illness either. It was such a light bulb moment to read and to listen to each of those podcasts. It made it easier for me. I had a month to settle down, take it easy. I could go to Penny, I could go to Rosemary, I could go to my group of hikers here and talk about it. But it helped me. It helped the journey at the very, very beginning. I was then able to get my family involved. I didn't want to involve my family at the very beginning as it was Christmas. So once that passed and I had time to absorb the information and learn about my illness, I was a lot less scared. And it's exactly what it says in the book. The more you learn about it, the less scared you are. So some of the advice that's given in the book, I really followed it. And because it just made so much sense to me. And it was the way it was illustrated too. It made it easy for me to follow it. And I just can't thank you enough. And I tell everybody. I mean, my friends calling from other places, I'll say, hey, is anybody in your family going through anything? It doesn't have to be palliative care. Don't be afraid of the word palliative. That was the other thing. I had to get past that palliative word because it's any illness, it's any life-altering experience. And I liked my little friend here. I loved your question because if everybody read this now, you're prepared for if your son has something, your daughter has something, your mother has something. It really prepares you in a very rational way and easy to comprehend, easy to understand. It helped me tremendously. I thank you so much. I thank you so much, Dr. Sammy and Dr. Hsien, and I say Hsien because I don't pronounce it very well. But I feel like you're my friends. I listen to your voices all the time. You also have the most gentle voices. It's just amazing. I wish this book was in every waiting room in the country. In fact, I think I'm bringing it to my surgeon and to my nurse navigator and I talked to Rose about this. I said, Rose, is it inappropriate for me as a patient just kind of slip that on the table? Because other women and men are waiting in the waiting room with me. And we're reading pamphlets about the hospital, which is wonderful. But I think that needs to be there. I really do.
Okay. So first of all, be careful because we're going to invite you on our podcast.
Oh, yeah, well, next time I'll try to have my thoughts a little better organized.
No, you say you're nervous, but I would say, oh, you're
No,
a
I'm
very good
nervous. Yeah,
speaker.
I'm not nervous right now, but I was at the beginning.
Yeah.
Knowing the language for me was helpful too.
Yes.
The language you use in the book is so accessible, and I think we need to learn as people who don't use that language all the time to familiarize ourselves with it. And yeah.
I think, the language comes from years of working in people's homes, because when you're in people's homes, all sorts of homes, you need to just be real. We can't hide behind the white curtain or the lab coat or, the fancy words. Nothing will work in caring for someone in their home if we don't just really speak naturally and plainly about concepts that can be complicated, right? We don't need to make them more complicated with Latin and Greek words and medicalize everything. I would say that Sian and I feel very affirmed by your testimony, for sure. And I actually would bet that Penny felt less helpless as your friend, being able to give you something that she feels so passionate about as well. And so we're hoping it ends up being sort of a win-win on both sides. The person who is suggesting the book, who would rather just take the whole illness away for you, right? And the person receiving the book. And I encourage you to give it to your healthcare team. That's what we want. We had one person send us a photo in Instagram. She was in the waiting room. She had some kind of cancer and spends a lot of time in the waiting room. There was a whiteboard there, a whiteboard, the ones you can erase. Well, whatever it was that was on it, she erased everything. And she wrote one by one the 7 keys and the website, and then took a picture and said, you know what people need to know in this waiting room? They need to know, how to get this content. So if you can think of ways to market this in any way, love to talk to you about it. Thank you for what you've shared with us. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Curious and brave.
Yeah, I know, Bill, you want to wrap up, but maybe I'll just say a closing thing, because first of all, I didn't know people would stay this long. I thought they would all start up. So thank you, and I know we are grateful to have the opportunity to share with you, with really our friends in Bow Valley. But I really want to remind all of you that you are so lucky to live in a community with so many committed, passionate, knowledgeable people. Teresa's leadership, I'm looking around, you guys are really lucky, and it's really tapping into that, sharing that, and lifting each other up. I think that's not common. You have something really special there, and building, and if some of these tools can help you grow your network or make it more visible, or to get some big name donors, hey, let's do it, right? So I just want to thank all of you for all of the work that you're doing, or even if you're just facing it yourself, that there are people out there in your community who want to help. And so we're just glad to know you and really be a part of your journey too.
Thank you. I'm just aware of our time, and we are at the end of it. Penny, I would love to hear your thoughts. If you have something that's about 30 seconds, jump on quick, and then I'm going to bring us to a close.
I thoroughly believe that this is a book, not just the workbook, but the book that should be read by everybody, and hence why most of my friends got it for Christmas 2 years ago. It's never too early to read. So you may not want to read it right away, but it should be in schools. It shouldn't just be in doctors' offices. So, and Val, I'm so proud of you.
Thank you, Penny, for those closing thoughts. And with that, 3 quick announcements. One is we will email you the survey link if you didn't have time during the discussion to jump onto that, and sometimes that happens. And secondly is just want to let you know about something happening at PCSBV. We are doing something we are calling Pals for Palliative as a fundraiser this spring. And the link for that is on our website. If you go to our website, I'll also just put it in the chat very quickly right now. The summation is it's an opportunity for you to do something you love. It could be hiking, swimming, knitting, baking, crocheting, drinking wine with your friends, all as a way to bring awareness to our organization and raise funds for us. So you are invited to check that out. We are a not-for-profit, and we are entirely funded by donations and grants, and we're so deeply grateful for everybody that supports our work. A shout out to our team in the background helping today, and to a number of our staff, team, and volunteers that showed up for the conversation. And our biggest gratitude to Dr. Sammy and Dr. Hsien, because they give a whole lot of their lives into this. I can't begin to imagine really the number of hours they've put into this in 10 years. Yeah, look at that. It barely shows, Sammy.
And
You
look,
got to manage it well.
yeah,
Thanks for
That
making a
was
difference in
travel.
our world. Nah, it's all good, love. Thank you so very much. We're going to close this. If you wish to reach out to Sammy and Sien, you can do that through their website. Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you, Bill.